6 September 1944, 07:20 hours, near Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. A low mist clung to the hedgerows, the kind that softened every contour but amplified every sound. Boots pressed into damp soil. A breeze pushed the lingering smell of cordite across the shallow ridgeline. Somewhere in the distance, a GMC engine backfired. A sharp, clean report that made every man on the ridge lift his head. Generalleutnant Friedrich Weber, gray-eyed, hollow-cheeked, and running on 2 hours of sleep, raised his binoculars, but said nothing. The staff officers beside him shifted, their greatcoats creaking, leather belts stiff with dried rain. Below them, the road curved out of the smoke-dusted countryside like a steel vein. And along that road, movement. Dozens of trucks. No, hundreds. At first, Weber assumed it was a morning supply column, perhaps another armored division pushing forward. But then more engines joined the hum. Another line appeared, then another. The trucks didn't end. They just kept coming, pouring around the bend like water freed from a dam. A captain beside him muttered, "Mein Gott, how many do they have?" Nobody answered. You could hear the engines through your ribs, a steady, relentless pulse. The mist vibrated with it. Even the crows lifted off the nearby trees, unsettled by the constant growl. Weber adjusted the focus. These weren't just trucks. They were identical, disciplined, perfectly spaced GMC CCKW. Canvas tops tight, headlights painted for blackout, tires kicking small sprays of mud in rhythmic, almost mechanical unison. Each truck carried fuel cans, ration crates, ammunition boxes. Some hauled entire spare engines chained down for transport. Others carried Red Ball Express MPs perched on running boards, arms raised to wave the convoy on without pause. It wasn't a column. It was a river with no visible beginning or end. And it was flowing toward the front. Wind tugged at Weber's coat. The metal of the binoculars chilled his hands. Behind him, Oberstleutnant Heller tried to lighten the moment, voice dry. At least we know where the Americans hide their factories. No one laughed. Weber kept watching. 1 truck, 2 trucks, 10, then 20 more. Every minute that passed added new lines in the distance. Trucks merging from feeder roads, forming a constant conveyor belt of steel and fuel. A machine with no stutter, no hesitation. He felt something uncomfortable in his chest. Not fear. Not yet. Something worse. The slow realization that his mental map of the war might be obsolete. An enlisted aide jogged up the ridge, breath visible in quick bursts. "General, more reports from the 352nd. They say convoys like this have been moving day and night. No breaks." Heller frowned. "Impossible. No army can sustain that speed. No one moves supplies faster than we do." Weber lowered the binoculars. He had commanded panzer regiments from Poland to Kursk. He had lived by one gospel. War belongs to those who move fastest. Blitzkrieg had shattered armies because it was a storm. Lightning strikes, rapid thrusts, fuel calculated to the liter. Every kilometer a gamble. A daring gamble. But what stood before him now wasn't daring. It was mathematical, predictable, and horrifyingly massive. Another truck rolled past below, its hood ornament bouncing in the ruts. The driver, barely older than a teenager, chewed gum with bored focus while his co-driver scribbled something on a clipboard. Behind them came another truck, and another, and another. "You see it?" Weber asked quietly. Heller frowned. "See what?" "They don't need lightning," Weber said. "They have a tide." He paused. "And tides do not tire." For a moment, no one spoke. The convoy kept coming, engines blending into the sort of steady mechanical roar that numbs the senses. Somewhere far down the road, a whistle blew, a signal to merge another freight line into the column. The Red Ball Express, a moving continent of logistics. Weber felt the knot tighten. If the Americans could push fuel and ammunition forward at this scale, without pause, without limits, then armored warfare had changed. Blitzkrieg wasn't dying. It was already dead. They were just now seeing the body. One of the younger staff officers whispered, "If this is only one route, how many more are there?" Weber didn't answer. He simply raised the binoculars as another line of trucks appeared from the eastern road, and another behind that. The horizon was gone, replaced by steel, canvas, rubber, and the steady heartbeat of engines that would not stop. He exhaled softly, breath trembling in the cool air. The tide was rising, and it was rising faster than any of them had imagined. The fog thinned as the sun pushed higher, revealing more of the countryside. More trucks, more movement, more proof. What had seemed like an unusually large convoy at dawn had become, by mid-morning, a procession so vast that officers began quietly checking their maps again, as if the paper might offer an alternative explanation. But the maps were clear. The road system the Allies now controlled was clear, and the trucks were still coming. General Weber stepped down from the ridge, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. His staff followed, all of them shaken in their own quiet ways. You could see it in the breathing, a little too quick, a little too tight, and in the way, hands hovered near coat pockets, searching for cigarettes or matches. A Feldwebel trotted up with a field telephone handset hanging from its cord. "Herr General, the 12th SS reports they've seen convoys of similar size near Argenton. Hundreds of trucks. Fuel marked for Patton's Third Army." "Hundreds?" Oberstleutnant Heller echoed. "From one division's viewpoint alone." The Feldwebel nodded. "Jawohl. And they say the Americans have military police running. Checkpoints to keep the roads clear. No halts allowed." Weber didn't respond immediately. He stared at the mist lifting off the road, revealing even more trucks snaking toward the front. He had never seen logistics like this. Not in France, not in Russia, not even during the opening days of Barbarossa, when the Wehrmacht was at its absolute peak. The Americans weren't improvising. This was organized. This was intentional. This was scale. A young lieutenant behind him swallowed hard. "General, with this amount of resupply, their armor could push anywhere. They won't run out of fuel." The words hung in the air like a bad omen. Weber finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Mark the date, gentlemen. What we see here is not a column of trucks. It is the future, and it has arrived." A silence followed, long enough that you could hear the distant pop of a backfiring engine echo between the hedgerows. A closer look at the machine. To understand what they were seeing, you have to imagine the sheer physical sensation of it. The engines forming a constant rumble that pressed into your chest. The air vibrating with the movement of thousands of pistons. The faint diesel haze drifting over the hedges. It felt less like observing a convoy and more like standing beside a living organism, a beast made of steel and gasoline. A cluster of Wehrmacht signals troops arrived on motorcycles, mud splattering from their tires. One pulled off his goggles, leaving pale circles around his eyes. "Herr General," he said, voice hoarse. "We scouted further east. At least 4 more lines of trucks converging on this region, all moving at maximum speed. The MPs use whistles and colored flags to keep them flowing." Heller exhaled sharply. "How do they coordinate so many?" A young radio man answered quietly. "Sir, they communicate by constant radio relay, short bursts, almost no delays." He hesitated. "I overheard one operator mention they're completing the entire route in 1 day." "1 day?" Heller repeated, incredulous. "Impossible. Even our lightest vehicles take—" Weber cut in gently. "Captain, they have better roads, more fuel, more trucks, and evidently, more drivers than we calculated." One of the aides lowered his voice. "Sir, this is only one route. They call it the Red Ball Express. There are others." A new, sharper silence settled over the officers. The Americans had not simply matched German mobility. They had rewritten it. They had industrialized it. Maximizing roads, maximizing manpower, maximizing fuel flow. What Germany had once accomplished through daring speed, the Allies were now achieving through overwhelming capacity. Blitzkrieg had thrived on the enemy's inability to react fast enough. But this was something else. This was an army that would never run dry. A moment of quiet admission. As the staff moved back toward their command vehicles, Weber slowed his pace. He glanced at the churned mud beneath his boots, at the damp grass, at the cigarette stub someone had ground out hastily. Then he looked back toward the endless line of American trucks. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Speed is nothing," he said, "if the fuel runs out, and theirs will not." Heller stiffened. "Sir, if you're suggesting, I'm suggesting reality," Weber answered. "Blitzkrieg was built on temporary advantage, temporary fuel stocks, temporary fear. This," he nodded toward the horizon, "this is permanent." The officers exchanged troubled glances. Even the wind seemed to pause. There it was, the first open admission from a senior commander. The war had changed in a way Germany could no longer match. And as if mocking the moment, another convoy merged onto the road below, horns chirping, MPs waving flags, engines roaring in perfect sequence. Weber watched it pass. Then his aide rushed up, breathless, face flushed. "Herr General, new intelligence from Army Group B." He swallowed. "You should see it immediately." Weber didn't look away from the trucks. "Is it worse than this?" The aide hesitated. "Yes, sir." Weber clenched his jaw, squared his shoulders, and gestured for the man to lead the way. Whatever news awaited him, it would not be good. The briefing tent was dim, lit by a single swaying lantern that cast long shadows across the maps pinned to the canvas walls. Mud clung to the floorboards. The air smelled faintly of wet wool and stale cigarettes, the perfume of an army living on the edge of exhaustion. Weber entered with his officers in tow. The supply officer from Army Group B, Hauptmann Krull, stood rigidly at attention, his jaw tight enough to tremble. Sweat dotted his temples despite the cool morning air. "Report," Weber said. Krull didn't waste time. He stepped to the central map and tapped the fuel markers with a trembling finger. "Herr General, our stocks are down to 30% in most sectors. In several divisions, less than that. Requests for resupply have doubled in the last week. Our depots are emptying faster than we can replace them." Heller frowned. "Is this due to enemy air interdiction?" "Partially," Krull admitted. "But the larger issue is transport. We no longer have enough trucks, nor drivers, nor fuel for the few we have." Weber's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" Krull met his gaze, voice thinning. "Meaning the Americans can move 10 liters of fuel for every 1 liter we move." A silence fell so heavy that even the map pins seemed to vibrate with it. In the background, the lantern hissed softly. The hard numbers Krull continued, pulling a wet notepad from his tunic. "They rotate drivers in shifts. When one rests, another takes over. Roads are cleared exclusively for them. MPs direct every junction. Supply runs never stop." He flipped a page. "The Red Ball Express is operating 24 hours a day. Up to 6,000 trucks. Fuel columns. Ammunition columns. Spare parts. Medical supplies. They complete round trips in a single night." Heller shook his head. "That's not a supply chain. That's a factory," Weber finished. Krull nodded. "A factory that moves." Another moment of silence. The officers stood still, listening to distant thunder. Artillery, or perhaps another massive truck column rolling somewhere beyond the tree line. Weber inhaled slowly. The air tasted of damp canvas and smoke. "Tell me the worst part," he said. Krull swallowed. "Even if Berlin sends trucks, we cannot fuel them. Even if we find fuel, we cannot protect the convoys. Even if we protect them, we do not have the roads." He hesitated. "This is not a temporary setback." Weber felt the muscle in his jaw tighten. There it was, the truth laid bare on a mud-stained map under a flickering lantern. Everything Germany had once weaponized, speed, daring, surprise, was now being swallowed by the sheer logistical mass of the Allies. Blitzkrieg had been a knife fight. The Americans had brought a factory. Human reactions in the tent. Teller paced a few steps, boots grinding mud into the floor. If their fuel arrives this quickly, Patton could swing north, strike toward the Ruhr, or east toward the German border itself. "Both options are being discussed," Krull muttered. A junior signals officer sitting near the map rubbed his temples. "If they don't need a pause, they can keep attacking. Every day, every hour." Another officer whispered, "How do we fight an enemy that never stops?" No one answered. The only sound was the lantern's steady hiss and the soft rustle of someone's greatcoat sleeve brushing against a map. You could feel the emotional crack forming, the moment when trained soldiers realize the problem is not tactical, not even operational. It is systemic, like trying to punch through a wall that keeps regenerating. Weber stepped forward, placed both hands on the table, and stared down at the positions. His fingers left faint impressions in the damp wood. "The Americans do not simply have more trucks," he said quietly. "They have more of everything." He looked up, meeting each man's eyes. "And they have decided to use it without mercy." Another blow. The tent flap snapped open in the wind. Rain spattered the ground as a runner burst in, soaked to the bone, breath coming in sharp bursts. "Herr General, additional intelligence." "Speak," Weber said. The runner pushed wet hair from his face. "New aerial photos show multiple fuel depots south of Avranches. Massive storage. Reinforced. Rail-fed." "How large?" Weber asked. The runner hesitated. Large enough to supply 2 entire field armies. Heller nearly swore. Another officer dropped his pencil. Weber straightened slowly. Then this convoy we saw is only the beginning. The runner nodded. Jawohl. Lightning flashed faintly outside the tent. The thunder that followed sounded like artillery. Inside, nobody spoke. For months they had clung to the belief that the Western Allies were only strong at the point of attack, that their logistics would falter, that their armor would outrun its fuel, that their advance would stall just long enough for the Wehrmacht to counterstrike. But the photographs, the convoys, the fuel columns, the relentless movement, all of it pointed to a terrifying truth. The Americans weren't slowing down. They were accelerating, and the German army had no answer left that didn't exist on paper. Weber finally exhaled. His voice was almost a whisper. We are fighting an enemy that manufactures momentum. He closed the map folder with a soft, final thud. Prepare the officers, he said. They need to see what we're up against. Outside, engines growled in the distance, a constant, unbroken reminder of the tide that was rising. The officers assembled near a battered farmhouse overlooking a shallow valley. The rain had tapered off into a slow, steady drizzle, enough to beat on greatcoats and run down helmet rims, but not enough to obscure vision. Weber wanted clear visibility. He wanted his men to see as everything. Herr General, Heller said quietly, are you certain they must witness this firsthand? Weber didn't answer. Not verbally. He simply nodded toward the valley. Below them, the road wound between hedgerows, slick with rainwater. Pockets of mist lingered, rising in thin curls from the ditches. The scent of wet soil mixed with diesel fumes, drifting faintly on the wind. Then, a low growl. Then several. Then Zanins. Engines. Again. The same sound as earlier, but now amplified by rain and resonance, creating a steady mechanical thunder that pulsed through the ground. A couple of the junior officers shifted uncomfortably. One instinctively adjusted his belt. Another tugged at his gloves. You'll want your binoculars, Weber murmured. When the first trucks emerged from the mist, they seemed almost unreal. Silhouettes against the gray, headlights hooded, canvas tops beaded with water. The convoy stretched back as far as the road allowed, and then further still, merging from a secondary line. But this time, something was different. These weren't empty transports returning for another load. These were fully loaded columns. Fuel, ammunition, spare treads, entire pallets of artillery shells, even towable repair trailers. Everything needed to sustain an army on the offensive. Krull, the supply officer, whispered, That amount of fuel could move an entire corps. Weber kept his voice steady. It will. The trucks rolled on relentlessly, almost elegant in their precision. MPs on motorcycles escorted them, wet trench coats flapping, whistles sharp and urgent. An officer stepped forward. Sir, how are they driving this fast in this rain? Our units can barely maintain half this pace. They have priority roads, Weber said, and they enforce them. Then came another reveal. Subtle, but devastating. A Red Ball Express MP in the passenger seat of a passing truck glanced up, noticed the cluster of German officers on the ridge, and nudged his driver. The driver looked too, not with fear, not with panic, but with the blank focus of a man on schedule. He didn't slow. He didn't flinch. He didn't even change posture. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't arrogance. It was indifference. To him, the German officers watching from the ridge were irrelevant. Background. Heller's breath caught. They don't care. Weber nodded. Why should they? We cannot reach them. We cannot stop them. Their security details, aircraft, MPs, all designed to keep this column moving no matter what. The realization settled heavily over the group. They had become spectators in a war they once dictated. A system built to overwhelm. As the convoy continued, more layers revealed themselves. Several trucks hauled massive red drums stacked 3 high. Aviation fuel, marked carefully for frontline squadrons. Another carried entire pallets of K-rations, neatly wrapped and stacked. Still another pulled a trailer packed with replacement transmissions for Sherman tanks. A junior officer muttered, "They're transporting a division's lifeblood in a single morning." Krull nodded grimly. "And they will do another run tonight." The rain intensified briefly, pattering on helmets and pooling on the ridge. One officer wiped droplets from his binocular lenses with a gloved thumb. Another hunched deeper into his coat. You could feel the emotions shifting, shock giving way to something heavier, something unfamiliar to men accustomed to being the ones who pushed others back on their heels. Heller whispered, This is not an army marching. This is an army flowing." Weber exhaled. "You are beginning to understand." A distant horn sounded, short, firm, authoritative. Another line of trucks emerged from a feeder road, merging into the river of movement without stopping. Drivers signaled with raised hands. MPs directed traffic, the entire flow adjusting like clockwork. A machine, adaptable and relentless. And just when the officers thought they'd seen enough, a final detail shattered whatever remained of Germany's confidence. A long flatbed truck passed below, carrying spare radial engines for Thunderbolt fighters. 3 engines, chained and covered. Behind it, another flatbed carried crates of .50 caliber ammunition stacked nearly to the frame. A lieutenant whispered, voice barely audible, "If their planes never run out of fuel, our armor cannot move in daylight." Weber said quietly, "Correct. And if their tanks never run out of fuel, they will never pause." Correct. And if their infantry has endless ammunition, correct. Another officer asked the question they were all thinking. How do we fight a force that cannot be exhausted? Weber didn't answer immediately. He let the question hang in the drizzle, heavy and unspoken. The trucks below kept moving. The mud churned. The road vibrated. The valley itself seemed to hum under the weight of American industry. Finally, Weber spoke. "You do not fight such a force," he said softly. "You endure it, until you can't." More trucks came, then more. No one asked another question. When the last vehicle vanished around the far bend, Faber closed his binoculars slowly, almost ceremonially. He turned to his officers, faces pale, eyes wide, confidence drained like fuel from a punctured tank. "Gentlemen," he said, "Blitzkrieg is finished." Behind them, thunder rolled faintly across the sky. Or maybe it was just another convoy, already approaching from beyond the mist.